Welcome to The Artistic Spot, a podcast about art, talent, and entrepreneurship, where you are also the artist. And now, your host, Jose Rodriguez Marmol.
And this is how we welcome you guys to Artistic Spot, a whole new podcast about art, talent, and entrepreneurship, where you, the audience, are also the artist. We're actors and actresses of our own movies, singers of our own musicals, and writers of our own books. Speaking about actors, today we have a very, very special guest. Salvador Chacon is joining us live from Los Angeles, California. He will be talking to us about his acting career, directing, producing, and creative directing career in the entertainment business, and discussing a little bit about his new acting experience in a new FX series, Mayans MC. And this is how we welcome Salvador Chacon to Artistic Spot. How are you, Salvador, today?
Hello, how's it going? Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
It's our honor to have you, Salvador, with us here tonight on Artistic Spot. Our main goal is to bring real-life stories to an audience that has a lot of dreams and goals, and that it's always pursuing to make their wildest dreams come true. And you are the perfect example of persistence, commitment, and let's begin a little bit about talking about your life. Who is Salvador Chacon? For those listening in Orlando, Los Angeles, Mexico, and around the world, those artists that are listening to you, who is Salvador Chacon?
Well, thank you for the great introduction. And Salvador Chacon, he's a guy that was born in Mexico City 34 years ago, roughly, or so. And, I was born in Mexico City. My parents are Mexican. Living in Mexico City and growing up in Mexico City is, it's already an amazing experience for people that haven't been in Mexico. And while growing up, I was just exposed to theater and art, and my parents were always fans of taking us to the theater and taking us to museums and exploring that sort of artistic side that, sometimes not everyone gets to live when you're young. For me as a kid, I was always drawn to perform, to do little shows and performances for the grown-ups, for the adults. I remember when my parents had get-togethers at their home, I would always try to wrangle the other kids, the young kids around, to just put up a talent show or put some sort of performance for the grown-ups. And that's kind of where my I guess artistic career began. Always had it sort of in me to do this the presentation of something, and luckily enough, I went to school to a bilingual school, which had a strong theater program since elementary, and as I go through elementary and junior high, and we had to do 2 theater plays a year, and one in English, one in Spanish, which for me was amazing. It was sort of I would always look forward to that on the school year, doing the play. And and we would do serious stuff. We would do Shakespeare and Moliere, and for those who know a bit more of the Spanish and Hispanic literature, we would do José Zorrilla,
wow,
and Lope de Vega, and that kind of plays as kids, which was interesting because you would get to dress as Romeo or whatever and do it. So that was a big part that made sort of define that I really wanted to do this, and so that's sort of my background. And of course, after I came to the States and went to college and all that sort of thing, my first job was on set, assisting.
So can you talk to us a little bit about that first job that you had after you mentioned something really important, Salvador, which is going back to what made you happy when you were a child, because I personally believe that when you are a child, you do things that you're most passionate about, in acting was the things that you were passionate about, even though it was in theater, which is another question I have for a later time today. So what can you describe from that Salvador young artist that started on set and that his first job was on set? What can you tell us about that experience you had?
Well, first of all, I think it was very eye-opening, to see how a movie was done. And if you allow me, I'll go back a little bit just so that you have more context on it. I went to school. I did the drama program in Texas, in the University of Texas, Pan American. And even though I was doing the drama program, I was constantly, doing electives on production and post-production and all sorts of things. And, you sort of learn a theory and some practical stuff of how this is done. So when I graduated, I saw a post that there was going to be a movie filming in Texas, in town. And in Texas, because I lived in the southern part of Texas, so not a lot of film projects go down there. Mm-hmm. And I was immediately, it was like I have to take part of it. I was always driven to go do it. And I was like, well, I'll take a job of whatever it has to be. I just want to learn how to be on a set, how things are done on set, and how you make a movie. So in that sense, my dream of acting has always been ahead of me and in front of me and very clear. But I knew that I just had to go and work in the industry one way or the other to eventually do what I really wanted to do. So my first job, I got a job as a second assistant camera, which I knew what the deal was with all that. And 5 weeks shooting in Texas, the Texas brush, super hot, carrying the camera, and so. But I loved it, I loved it, and I got to make great friends that are now friends of mine here in LA, and I got to see how things were done on reality and not on theory, So that was amazing. That was for me a beauty.
And you still remember and treasure those days, because sometimes people tend to forget where they started from. And I think that one of the most important things when you reach and get to a level where you're saying, okay, I'm reaching my goals, I'm making my wildest dreams come true, but I know that I started doing this job and my first job ever was doing this. So you always feel passionate about and also resonate with young artists that are doing the same thing now that you did maybe a few years ago, right?
Absolutely. I think it's great. I think it actually has created a deeper value for me, not just, for the actors in the industry, for everyone else, because I was a second assistant camera, I was a sound assistant, I did art. And now when I'm on set, and I see this humans working, on their specific tasks, I understand what they're going through, and I understand the importance of each one of them's job, in film. If they don't, basically, if no one would be working there, you just can't make the movie. So therefore, for me, it was very eye-opening to see, oh my God, this person that does sound and that does the cables here and does the lights there, they all have a specific task that will make this one picture look fantastic. Mm-hmm. Therefore, if I'm in front of a camera, that would be me or whomever that is. But it just creates a value and understanding for everyone else that's working around you to make that scene, history.
So it's basically, it takes a village to bring out something really important, because sometimes we sit in front of the TV, we go to the movies, we go to the theater, but we just see the people that are just on the screen. But what about the people behind the camera? That village that brings and makes that happen. So sometimes we tend to forget that the entertainment business, it's all about a big amount of people working behind and making things happen for that magic to happen again, right?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, of course, big projects have a lot of people working on them. Medium projects have not so much people, and then small projects have very few people. But yet, it's great to see when it doesn't matter if it's a small project and you have 5 people working on it. They're all so dedicated. It's like, we have to do this. The set needs to look great. The sound needs to be perfect. The light has to be in place. So it's all about the commitment that people have for their jobs, which I think in our industry it's key to success.
Correct. You mentioned something. You were born in Mexico, and now you're living in LA, which is a goal for everybody involved or dreaming to be in the acting careers, or let's say the entertainment business per se. But you also said, and you mentioned, you live in Texas. So what's the difference between jumping from Mexico City, going to Texas, and then moving to LA to something bigger? What has been the difference between Salvador when he was living in Mexico? Of course, he was a child, but then being in Texas, working in plays and small movies, maybe first job, and then going to LA to something bigger. What's the difference between the Salvador by then and now?
Well, I think definitely experience and age, of course, have played a time. I moved to the States in 2004 from Mexico, and the way I ended up in Texas is because my grandfather used to live there for a while. He had a house there where he'd go and spend long seasons, and we would go visit him and go shopping and hang out with him, and we would do that on my high school years. So at that point, I was kind of like exploring, I was never like, oh, I want to leave my family, I'm done, I just need to get out of there. I was never like that. I love my family. It was always fantastic. Thankfully, I'm very lucky. But I did want to go do my own thing, so for me, it's like I didn't really felt like staying in Mexico, and at that point, like going to New York or going somewhere, it seemed more complicated and difficult. So, going to South Texas, and my grandfather was there, and then there was a branch of the University of Texas, and I was like, I'm just going to apply. So I applied, and I got in, and I was like, I'm going to move to Texas. So I moved to Texas, and my parents were happy, and they've always supported me. So they were supportive of that, and that's what brought me to the States officially, at college. So, while in Texas, very, very different from LA, I learned a lot. I went through my college years and, sort of started finding myself and what I wanted from life and the things that I liked or that I didn't like. Still at a young age, but I feel like laying the ground for it. So, I did the drama program, and I was trying to work in as many creative projects as possible. Thus came the movie right after I graduated, and the one thing kind of leads to the other, because I met people in the movie that's like, well, if you wanna do a sound assistant gig, why don't you come to New York with me for like 2 months or 3 months? Like, well, let's go to New York. Why not? So, I went to New York, and I had like 2 years of going to New York back and forth, and then Texas, and going to Mexico City, visiting my friends that were also doing like movies and sort of things down there, and helping them produce or put together their own projects, which helped me learn the whole production aspect of it. And until I started getting production jobs that paid me, which allowed me to save enough money to finally, do the big move from having like a weird home base in Texas to LA in 2010.
So moving to LA in 2010, but before that, you mentioned 2004, moving from Mexico to the United States. The next question will resonate with the audience and the people that come